Hello and welcome to another Procreate tutorial where today I'm going to show you how to create this just endless road design. Now you may notice this type of design from a similar one I did here on YouTube as well, which I'll throw up on the screen now. So if you've already done that one, you'll love this one as well. There's just a few slightly different techniques throughout this, but ultimately it follows the same philosophy. Now as always, you're going to need everything that's linked in the description down below under the requirements section. And there's helpful videos in case you've never installed palettes and brushes before. I apologize throughout the whole of this video if I sound a bit croaky or a bit slow or I'm losing my marbles a little bit. Again, I'm not very well at the time of recording this one, so apologies throughout the whole of this. But make sure to share your designs with me at the very end on Instagram by tagging me in your finished creations, and you can do one better and share them with the community over on my Discord. And if you want to go ahead and support the channel, you can go ahead and subscribe for weekly content. And if you want to get access to a catalogue of over 80 exclusive tutorials, you can come and join me over on Patreon. With 3 added every single month, it continues to grow and there's always new content. So make sure to hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. And with all that said, enjoy the tutorial and let's get started. So once you've created your canvas and you've added in the stencil guide, and to do that, just simply go up to your actions and go to the option of add and insert the photo that I've provided. It's just this very simple perspective guide. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page when we get started. Now, if we go ahead and just lower the opacity down of that down to around about sort of 20%, so we can just about see it on screen. And you'll notice in my layers, I have just the one layer. So I'm going to create a new one underneath our guide and that will get us started. So before we carry on, let's go to our background color and let's grab this middle color on the far right column. Let's then hit done. On the empty layer we created, we'll go to our colors. We'll go ahead and grab the top color here in the top left of the palette. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to add in a symmetry guide. So if we go to our actions, we go to canvas. We're going to go ahead and go to drawing guide. We're going to turn that on. We're going to edit the drawing guide and we're going to go to symmetry. And it should just drop it pretty much on top of our guide. So you need to make sure the option is set to vertical and hit done. And then what you do on one side is reflected on the other. Now if we go ahead and go to our brush and we change it to, let's go to something such as, well, in fact, we'll go to the monoline to start with. So we'll go to calligraphy and the monoline. And any size doesn't really matter. We're following this bottom line here on the left. And if we draw that all the way up to the center point, it will vanish at the end. And we can just nicely sort of link our lines together. And we can drag and drop the color in. Now we've done that, we can then go ahead and create some texture on this bottom area. And this is going to be obviously our road. So we're going to create a new layer, tap on it, and we're going to clipping mask it. We're going to select both these layers and group them together just so they're nice and tidy. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors. I'm going to grab this darker tone here in the middle of that first column. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to painting and we're going to go ahead and grab the Nico Rel. With that brush selected, probably size wise around about 16%, we're going to go ahead and make sure we've not got a drawing assist on because we want to sort of darken up this right hand side a bit more. And I want you to keep it really light with your pressure and just sort of streak up and down here, just sort of darkening up the road, added in a little bit of texture on this side. We're going to add more texture shortly. It's just like a very basic shadow. And we'll also add a little bit over here on the left where it just sort of runs off towards the woods a little bit more. So we'll just kind of bring in little areas here. And then you can just vary up the surface a little bit. For example, just adding in like the odd little line here and there just to vary up the color. Just keep it nice and sort of loose and just nice little random variations and sort of irregularities in the actual ground. If we go to our layers, we'll create another new layer. Tap on it and clipping mask it also. We'll go to our brush library and we'll grab the bottom left color in the palette. And because the light source will eventually come across here, we just want to sort of brighten up this area here of the ground. So using the Nico Rel, just going to try and introduce a bit of a brighter patch in the ground down here on the tarmac that goes towards that center point. It doesn't have to stretch all the way across. We only want it to just be about here where that light source is going to be the brightest. Next, we'll go ahead and add in the paintwork on the ground. So we'll go ahead and we'll go to our layers. I'm going to grab the top color here in the second column. Nico Rel still, but we're going to reduce the brush size down to maybe something around about sort of probably a bit smaller than that, probably around about 5%. In our layers, we're going to go ahead and create another new layer. And we're going to draw in a straight line, majority up the screen. So we're just going to draw in a straight line here. And you maybe don't want to press too firm. You don't want to sort of have it super, super perfect. If you can get some of this lovely texture in the line there, that'd be awesome. Now hold your pen down and pop your finger on the screen to make sure it's a nice straight line. So once it gets nice and straight like that, you've got the right angle. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to the layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor and just move it across until you've got a little bit of a gap in the middle. A little something like that. Then go to the layer, tap on it and merge it down so they're both on the same layer. And then grab your cursor, and we're going to have to do a couple of distorting here. We're going to grab the distort option and grab the middle node at the top and flatten that down. And we want to sort of drop it on this center line here. See that it's got the orange line there in the center of the screen. That lets me know that that middle node is smack bang in the center of the canvas. And to see that, just go to snapping and turn that on. I'll do the same at the bottom here, and I'll grab the middle node where I can. And it looks like it doesn't want to allow me to, so I'll have to zoom in a little bit, grab the middle node, pop it on that center orange line like so. And then we're just going to try and distort this. So we're going to bring in the nodes at the top to make it really, really narrow. And again, you're going to want to try and grab the middle one. It's going to be a little bit tricky. So you're going to have to try your best to try and link that up and then grab the middle one as it makes its way back onto the path. We're going to fade this line out shortly in a second, but we've got to try our best to distort it. Now, what we will do though, is if we tap on our cursor, now we've made it as narrow as we possibly can at this point. Tap on your cursor, then tap on it again and go to distort, and your nodes now will have reset to the actual width of the entire shape. And we can then go ahead and bring them in again, making them super narrow, and again, making sure that they're nice and sort of parallel to each other, and we hit that orange line. So see how narrow you can get with then still being able to grab that center line. Now you'll notice my line also doesn't run all the way quite to the very end because we're going to fade it out as I mentioned. So tap on your cursor when you're done and your line should start to just blend out. And if we go to our layer, we'll tap on it and we will add a mask to it. So we'll tap on it and add a mask. Go to our brush, change it to airbrushing and the soft brush. Make sure your color is set to black by double tapping at the bottom of the disc. And your size wants to be set around about sort of the 15% mark. We're just going to lightly go left to right and just fade out the lines because details disappear as they get further away. So you can just literally let that just blend out into nothing. Now we're going to do the same again with the sidelines of the road as well. So we'll go to our layers, we'll create another new layer. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the one in the bottom left of the palette. We'll go back to our brush under painting and the Nico roll. And again, we'll draw in a straight line, except we're just going to do one side of the road first, and then we'll just duplicate it and flip it. So we'll draw a straight line, pop your finger on the screen to make sure it's nice and straight. Then we can go ahead and grab our cursor. We can grab distort once again, and we can go ahead and try to grab that middle node at the top, put it down somewhere in like sort of the horizon area. Bring the middle node over here. If we can grab it again, you're just going to have to trial and error a few times. And at the top here, we want to try and squeeze those nodes in. Now, don't worry too much if they don't. We can do a little trick in a second. So that's roughly the guide, and you want the gap on the left of the road to be slightly bigger and then gradually get smaller. Tap on your cursor when you're done. Then go to your eraser, tap on your eraser, change your brush to, we'll go to the Nico roll. So we'll go to painting and the Nico roll. Brush size can be around about sort of 4%, that's fine. So if I go ahead and get underneath the line here, just right underneath it here, and tap and draw a line and hold my pen down, using the eraser, we can just erase a straight line just to make that white line get gradually tiny into the distance, like so. Nice little simple trick there. And then we can go to our layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it, grab your cursor, flip it horizontally and move it across. And if you've got snapping still turned on, you should end up with 3 blue lines just like this to let me know that I've moved it perfectly horizontal to the previous one. And then I can tap on my cursor when I'm done. Let's go to that layer, pinch those two together onto one. And let's now start to think about some textures in this space. So we're going to go ahead and where we've got 2 layers clipped to the ground, we're going to create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here at the top of the 3rd column there. Your brush wants to be set to the option under painting of the stucco brush. And we're going to make it around about sort of 30%. And we're going to cover a good majority of this bottom area here, going left to right, left to right, left to right. Try not to press too firm and sort of maybe vary up your pressure a little bit. And then once you've got a good amount of texture, grab your cursor. Go ahead and we'll just grab distort. We'll drag that top node down, flattening that down. and bringing it kind of towards the top of your lines, because again, that's where the details are starting to sort of disappear. And then we can bring in the node here on the top right, we can bring in the node here on the top left, and then that will narrow it a little bit too much. So we'll just stretch out the bottom ones as well, just so we can fit the shape. You're kind of matching to the shape that you've already got. And we're just going to try and bring these in even more. And every time you do this, you're sort of applying the texture to the ground. So it's not quite a nice, smooth, brand new bit of tarmac. It's a little bit sort of eroded, and that's cool. Bring that to there. We'll tap on our cursor when we're done. And at this point, we can then go ahead and go to that layer, tap on it and clipping mask it to the road. And you can, if you want to, tap on it and lower it down. This is very much dependent on how much pressure you added. So I'm going to go ahead and lower mine down a little bit. I'm going to drop it down to 70%. And that will vary on your different sort of pressure use cases there. Let's then add some texture to the yellow line. So we'll create a new layer, tap on it and clip it to the yellow line. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the middle color here in the second column. We're going to go ahead and we're going to zoom in on our line here. We've still got the stucco brush and we're going to bring that down to something around about sort of 7% and kind of just sort of scrape your pen through the line a little bit. So I'm just going to bring that down even smaller now. I'm going to just bring some of this texture through, say, the center point here and maybe a little bit on the edges. So kind of leaving sort of the center area of your line a little bit sort of more of the yellow tone to sort of live in that space. And as we get further down here, you're just adding in a sort of a nice random bit of color that will just eventually just stop because we can't see too well down there. Then we'll go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it, but change the blend mode this time from normal and change it to the option of add. We are going to make sure that this brush does go down to about 2% now. And then on the line, we'll go ahead and just sort of brighten it up in that center point as we were just talking about there. Maybe where the lighting's just catching on the paint. Maybe it's a little bit wet from the night before or it's been raining that day, whatever. We'll just add in sort of a nice little bit of variety with the yellow paint on the top. You can see I'm not quite going to the actual edge. I'm leaving that dark tone I just added in, but then just allowing the odd little bit of the lighter tone to just catch on here. Zooming out, that should just give you a nice sort of bit of variety to the line. Next, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add some texture to either side and let that just blend onto the actual road. So we'll collapse this group down for the road and we'll create a new layer in front. We'll go to our colors and we're going to grab the dark brown here at the top of the fourth column. Our brush wants to be set to the option of textures and we're going to go down to the grunge brush. It's one of my favorites for adding in some really nice random texture. And I've got a brush size there of about 24%. And what I want to do is I want to just sort of go along this edge here. And you can see I'm only going to roughly go up to that line on the guide there. I'm probably going to reduce that down in size, probably a bit down to about 14%. I'm going to try to fill it in, not leaving too much blue in the gaps, but leave maybe sort of patchiness to it because we've got a couple of other colors we're going to add on top. It doesn't need to be super solid. And you can overlap the edge of the ground that we've created. And then as we get further back, we want to reduce the brush size then down to about sort of maybe 7% and get really light with your pressure. If you press really firm and quick, you'll end up with a really big head on the brush. So what we want to try and achieve is as it goes further down here, we don't really know sort of the details. We want them just to sort of blend into one another. And I'm going to reduce the brush size even further down to about sort of 2%, get right down here. Now, I'm not going to add too much detail back here. I just want to sort of show that there's a darker edge to the road. And that's it really. And this is sort of the ground and the underside of the bush on the left, sort of forest off to our side there. And while I've got the small brush head, I'm also going to go ahead and just come down this edge as well, doing exactly the same, just going over the top of that sort of white line that we created. And then I'll gradually just increase the brush size. I'm up to about 5% now in this area. And I'll fill in these areas here too, just a little bit, but they're ultimately going to be trees all the way back here. And we'll continue just to bring that down. And it's in the closer areas we want to maybe think about in a second, just sort of drifting the dirt onto the road a little bit. So down here, we'll increase the brush size up to about 12%. So we can block this all in. Nice and sort of blocked in under here on the edge of the road. making its way through this foresty scape. Now, I don't mind if sort of the brown runs a little bit too high. The other one just a second ago was quite high. Now at this point, then we can start to think about, as I said, sort of, let's maybe reduce the brush size down to about 8%. And what if we just sort of let a little bit of mud here just run over the line and into the road itself? And I'm going to reduce the brush size down to about sort of 6%, trying to keep it nice and small, not too big with the detail just yet. And we can just run that back down there. We'll run in another area of mud, just where it's been kicked out. And you can do like really subtle small areas as well. Just like really subtle lines, just extra little details as the mud just makes its way across onto the tarmac. And then we can also add some in the center, because obviously with the cars driving through here, it would be nice and clear in the center, but maybe there's like a little bit of soil that's made its way up towards those lines, painted on the ground in there, causing a bit of a barrier for the mud. And then that's just, it's catching there a little bit. Just increase that up to about 8%. You can vary your size, it's just a preference thing at this point, really. There's nothing specific in the brush that you need. Just going to run this through the center there a little bit. I'm also going to do the same on the opposite side as well. I don't want to overlap my lines too much, especially in the middle here, but just, you know, a little bit of these extra little details. And you can then just drift the odd little patch into the center. I love that. I love when you see just one on its own. It just adds to the randomness, and we're trying to replicate real life. So that is very tricky and very random. I say that a lot in my tutorials, I know. On the opposite side here, let's go ahead and do exactly the same. Increase the brush size up to about sort of 11%. We'll get really close to the line, and then think about a spot that we want to just sort of run some mud into the tarmac area. We'll go ahead and do the same over here and let that just run across into the path. Along the paint will be great, and on top of it as well. Now this area over here is going to actually get fairly dark, so we can be very, very sort of, we can go ahead of ourselves almost at this point and just sort of, just lightly just over sort of the top of the line here, just blend that out, blending the mud down as well. And then you should end up with a little something like this. Feel free to, you know, experiment, add in like, you know, you could even go to like a larger brush size, maybe around about sort of the 20% mark, and just gloss up and down here to create like a very soft coating of the mud. You can do the same on both sides here. You know, we can run this up and down here. You don't want to add in too much, otherwise it'll look like a road from a zombie film, unless that's what you want to go for. You know, like an abandoned road of some sort. That looks pretty cool. Let's maybe just increase the size of that one just a tiny bit more. And that will do for our sort of base shape here. We're then going to go ahead and create a new layer in front of it. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to start to introduce a few different browns and also then some greens as well. So we're going to grab this lighter brown here in the second row in that fourth column. Brush size can be nice and small, around about sort of 9%. And just in here, just randomly sort of patch in some lighter sort of areas. Now you want to focus it more so in this area here, pretty much, not towards the top here. These are sort of the brown areas that are really close to the edge of the road and are going to end up maybe catching the light a little bit. Then once you've done that, reduce your brush size down. Let's maybe add some on top just to vary up some of this area of mud over here. Lovely stuff. And don't worry as it runs off into the distance. It's going to be out of view, out of focus. We don't care. Over here, I'm just going to add the lightest sort of variation in the brown on top. Over here on the right, it's very much going to be in the shadows. We will add just a tiny, tiny bit just to some of the ones on the roadside. I'm being super, super gentle with my pressure. And I'm just trying to gloss over the top just with random areas of pressure so that it's nice and randomly laid down. So I can see I've got a couple of little extra brighter patches in the brown there. Next, let's then go ahead and add in some of the leatherwood, adding in some sort of grassy look to it. So we'll create another new layer. We'll go to our colors, and we will start off with the middle color here in the third column. Now your brush for you will be under imported if you've downloaded the brush that I've provided. For me, it's in this collection here, and it's the leatherwood edited by myself, #1. So I've actually got a couple of different ones. And I'm at a 1% brush size, and the opacity set to 75% as always with this brush. And let's put it at the 3% brush size. And in here, we're just gonna try to sparingly add in some little areas of green, whether or not it's like a few leaves that have fallen on the floor or it's grass. And I'm just going to go left to right, just running up and down the brown here, trying to just be very light just to see where it wants to drop. And then maybe I can purposely, you know, like here on this little bit of brown, add in a little bit of green on the top there, and that's it. Under here, I'll add in a few more areas of green, leaving that lovely brown underlay underneath our green. Then we'll go to our colors. We will go ahead and grab the bottom color in the third column there. Brush size is going to be dropped to that 1% because we want to add in some sort of finer sort of details on here, trying to keep it kind of sparing though. And then on top of your green areas, you can add in some little patches of this like extra brighter green tone. And you can vary up the angle. It doesn't have to be horizontal. It can be upright. You can see I'm now at a bit of a diagonal sort of angle here, which will hopefully give us a little bit of a nod towards it being maybe like grass or something like that. So you've laid sort of the initial shape being a little bit more horizontal, and then these ones here can just be little blades of grass. And we're quite sort of zoomed in at this point. So again, as always, don't get lost in those details. So add a few back here, a few maybe on this little patch of green that is just made its way into the road there. Zooming out, that looks pretty cool. And it definitely has a bit of a sort of abandoned road look to it, this sort of aesthetic. Now we're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the top color in that third column. And then just on top of it, and more so towards the bottom edge of some of these dark areas, we're going to just try and just dash in this darker green to try and hopefully sort of blend it a little bit closer to our soil. So as if like there's a shadow underneath each one of the green patches. So I'm adding this darker tone here just towards the underside, and then a couple of dashes actually in the top area looks fine as well. It's just like blades of grass that are sort of not really getting any love from the light. And then definitely as we make our way further back here, sort of what will be underneath our trees, we can just leave that. And that's all we need to really do. Again, if you zoom out, you're just trying to sort of give the illusion there's a little bit of sort of grass over here. Again, we can always come back to it, as always with these tutorials. Now we're going to go ahead and just move on into the tree line. So we're going to go to our layers and we'll select all three of those for a minute and group them together. You can call that sort of road's edge, for example. And then in front of that, we're going to create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab that top color again on that top row, third color. Brush wants to be set to the option again of textures and grunge. And the size, we'll set it to around about sort of, let's go up to that 24% mark. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is, you can see that top line there, that's going to be our tree line. So what I want to do is I want you to try and sort of bring the green down towards the brown here. And that's going to be sort of our tree line meeting the earth down here. And you can overlap it a little bit if you want. It's just essentially where a branch is just like overhanging. It'll be quite cool. It'll add layers of depth to this. And we're going to just sort of zigzag our way up and down, zigzag our way up and down. Occasionally I'm trying to aim to leave like a little bit of a gap here and there. And we're kind of going to, we're not drawing a tree as such, but we're going to try and somewhat just add in sort of the base shape of trees, you know, like up and down here, especially towards the top of our little frame here. So like as we get closer to that line, try and sort of make them a bit pointier, maybe drop the brush down to like 14% or something, and then leave a gap and draw in a line. Ultimately, this is just a bit of background filler, but if you end up sort of planning it a little bit ahead of time, you leave kind of gaps in between that will just help us later on with our shape. It'll also break this solid mass shape down a little bit more as well. You know, it's going to be quite a big dark area that overhangs the sort of road a little bit. And if we can add in something here and get our sort of plan together, it'll be awesome later on. And ultimately in this sort of triangle area here, we're not going to be actually painting in the trees themselves. So at this point, we do need to really think about dropping it down to maybe 8% and trying to sort of draw in lines and then just go zigzag up and down them, as I've done loads of times in my tutorials, and just trying to make sure they're nice and pointy on the top, you know, maybe down to about 4% now. Again, we're not going to be coming back to these trees with too much love at this point. So we will just add in a little bit of a nod towards them and just keep getting smaller and smaller. I'm down to like 3%, trying to cram them in a little bit. And once I've kind of got my tree line sorted, I can then block in that bottom edge that I can see, you know, right beside the road there. And at this point, you can just almost draw in like pointy lines. Let's make that brush size 5%, blocking this bottom area down here. And again, right in the distance, we're not too interested too much in the details. They'll all be lost. And just maybe keep it a little bit more faint towards the bottom here. And then I'll make my brush size about 5% again, just blocking this gap here while I was working on the top of the tree. This bottom area here still needs filling in, so locking that in. I'm trying to be nice and sort of patchy with it. Again, leaving little gaps, because that's little gaps that then the sky is revealed through, and it just helps that whole thing look quite more realistic. Quite more realistic. It's probably the really bad English, I apologize. So let's go along here. Maybe add in a couple of trees that we can sort of see a little bit. Maybe there's a small one in there. And I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty good as a base shape. Next, let's go ahead and go to our layers and create another new layer. And we're going to swipe from left to right on both of these and group them together. So that's our base shape. And then with this new layer, we're going to start to add in the highlights. Now, later on, we are going to duplicate this across and then just do highlights on that individually. So for a minute, we're just working on the left side. Now, we're going to do one tree here on the far left, the closest one to us. Then we're going to draw in a tree and then put it in behind. And then we're going to somewhat see if we can duplicate stuff getting further back. So we'll break it down as we go. So this new layer here, we're going to go to our colors. We've got the dark color in place. Now, with the closer ones, I do want to maybe sort of fine them up a little bit with their shape. So we're still going to continue with that top color in the third column. Brush wants to still be set to the leatherwood edited by myself. So again, for you, it'll be right at the very bottom. Now the brush, I'm going to set it to 3%. Again, it's still at 75% opacity. I'm going to take a look at sort of the shapes that I've created here and then start to sort of just run down at a bit of an angle, a couple of sort of branches that run across. So I'm sort of using that guide as the base shape that we created a second ago and just running down a few branches that run across. Now I'm going to get up towards a strong point, and I normally try to like draw in a bit of a straight line like this and then just branch all of the lines off, just sort of flick them down. And you can go off to the left as well, of course, because you've got a center point here in our tree. I'm going to block in that center point, you know, right down the trunk almost, and then just flick a few of them off to the left over here, like so. And you can make it quite bold in the center. This one here is so close to us that I feel like we do have to just sort of give it a little bit more attention. And that is always sort of a common rule anyway. Things that are closer to you should be in more detail. Now at this point here, I'm kind of just sort of carrying on as if I was drawing in the full tree. Just trying to see all these little lines that we draw across in some of the blank spaces will potentially aid our design a little bit. And then we'll move to the next tree in behind. So again, we'll kind of just create that sort of middle point a little bit like this. And then we'll flick some branches out from there. And we could probably drop the brush size down to about a 1% and just try and be a little bit more particular with the point on the top here. And all of them are just sort of swooping down, curling outwards. They all sometimes have a little bit of a flick to them, and the odd one that sort of runs out on its own, a little bit more horizontal, is fine. You know, trees are random, of course. They've got lots of different angles, and the branches tend to all have different sort of elevations to one another. And that looks pretty cool to me. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's just continue just down here a little bit. I'm going to switch back to the 3% now, just so I can try and just make sure this is a little bit speedier in this part of the design. That's fine. And then again, we're just going to go ahead and just go down here and see how quickly that one came together. I'm just now zigzagging down because these ones are getting further away. We don't want to add in too much detail on them. We just want to sort of maybe sharpen up a few little branches here and there. And at the top, we can just try and add in that little point towards there. Again, zoom out. It doesn't matter if it's got a little bit of a fuzzy edge to it. Maybe it's something in behind that we can't see. It's slightly out of focus, and that's fine. Now, really, you just want to kind of go towards this sort of degree here. So this sort of point in your tree line is sort of where you should start to think about stopping the detail. It can stop exactly there. Next, let's go ahead then and go to our layers and create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors and add the next set of green, which is this one here. So it's the middle color in that third column. Now at this point, you are starting to think about lighting is here. It's going to come across and it's going to go over the top of the trees that will sit here. And if you drew in a line here, it would pretty much sort of fly through the tree line here and ultimately fill in this triangle area here. And that's where we're going to focus the majority of our highlights. Now, this highlight we're adding now is quite a light highlight. So we don't need to sort of worry too much in terms of we can fill in the majority of the tree. So I'm going to come down here and I'm just following exactly the same thing I did a second ago, where I'm just going to make my way down the tree, some of the branches, and especially if I can see the branches like up here where we've just spent a little bit of time putting the color in. And then down the center, you can sort of do a little bit more vertical lines just to add in some of the ones that are facing towards us. As we get further down, we can start to think about how does this tree look, the structure of it. And as we get further down, we can add some of this lighter green down here. It's the really bold green highlights that we want to try and avoid later on, adding in sort of the lower areas. So at this point, we're kind of definitely filling out the tree. We're filling it out, showing where all the branches are. And I'm just making little curves here and there and just little lines like this, making my way down. And then as I get towards the sort of the center point of it, I'm starting to make them a little bit more vertical, as if they're facing us. We're only just seeing sort of the front end of it. And if you get a little bit of space here, you can start to maybe flick a few out to the left-hand side. And you can always do that as well in the wrong area. So like over here on the right, you could have a branch that just drifts off this way. That's fine. Just dash the leatherwood in that direction. That's fine. There we go. That's looking good. And you don't have to fill out the entire space. People get carried away quite easily with making sure they need to fill in the entirety of the sort of silhouette of the tree. You don't need to do that. If you leave lots of gaps, it's just where the light's not getting towards sort of a branch or something. That's why down here you can almost see like it's just like the odd sort of tiny, it's not a leaf as such with this tree, but it's the odd sort of little area that is catching the light. Now you notice I'm going back into the work now and just going in and just creating little flicks off at the end. So they were very diagonal down, which I love. And then you can just get in there and just create little flicks off from all of the sort of diagonal lines down as they make their way outwards a bit more from the body of the tree. Now that's it. All we need to do for that tree there. Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to save that layer here on its own for a second. So I'm going to create a new layer, drag it underneath the one that we just worked on, and then we'll just work on this tree in behind and just follow the same principles. We're going to go down some of the branches we've already done. Now some of these at the top here I ended up doing with sort of the much smaller brush size. So I'm using the 3 on top. So just try and be a little bit careful with that. Now I don't want to sort of think about adding too much color that runs in behind this tree here. So for example, like I don't want to add in too many sort of green areas that run really close to this one here. Let's just give them a little bit of separation. So we can get kind of close and just think about how does this tree now branch out from here. Now sometimes you can't sort of help it. You will have to get a little bit close, but we're going to just try our best to add in less lighting. Again, as things get further away, we want to sort of maybe think about that. As we make our way down, there's a little bit of a gap there between them, enough that I can then plan that out for the next part of the design. I'm going to go ahead then and do the next tree down because we may use this layer later on. So I'm going to go ahead now and just drop the brush size down to 1%. I'm going to go down this tree here and I'm going to start to add in the highlights in exactly the same fashion, but because we've got the smaller brush size now, we can start to be a little bit more particular with where it lands, for one, and two, we're just trying to show that the detail now is starting to fall off and things are again a little bit further away. I keep repeating myself, but it's just because the rule is the rule. Okay, down here, little flicks, little dashes. You can do again a few in the center where some of the branches are catching the light. You can go up to the very top as well. Add in the odd one that maybe runs astray. And again, I'm going to go back in now and just create those little sort of flicks again where some of the branches are maybe pointing a little bit more upwards. Just adds in some fun variety in that tree. Now the sizes really do fall off there and that will help us then all the way back in a second. So we're only going to do the front 3. we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and we'll create a new layer. I'm going to go ahead and drag it above the main tree. So in here, we've kind of got the base color here for this tree, and then we've got the front one. Now I want you to create a new layer in front of the main one here on the left, and swipe from left to right on both and group them together. So it's a group in a group. That way we know that this group here is just this tree, and these two here we can duplicate later on and only add in a few details to it. So this layer here in this new group we've just created, we're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the bottom color in the third column. Our brush is going to go back to that 3% brush size. And now what we're doing is we're looking for the edge of these branches. Now what you can do at this point, because of the way we set up our layers, if you turn off the green in those trees in behind, I've just turned that off, I can now see exactly where my branches are here. Now it's up to you. You can drop it down to the 1%, or you can do a 2. It's totally up to you. Or you can even rock the 3. What we're going to try and do though is we're going to go along some of these green areas here. You don't have to do every single one, but going along some of them here, adding in a lovely brighter highlight. Now towards the top end, you maybe want to think about covering your tree in a little bit more love, because again, that's going to be absolutely sort of bathed in the sunlight in a second. And I'm just dashing over the top, and because the leatherwood's nice and small, it's nice and patchy, it's going to add in sort of lots of little details. Now don't be afraid in the gaps here just to add in like the odd little speck here and there, and that's maybe just a little branch just popping its head out, and we can just about catch it, just about add in some nice highlight on top of it. I'm going to come down here, down this area again, add in sort of the odd little speck again. And I'm thinking about that triangle that I said about earlier, so sort of thinking about sort of the midway point of this tree. I'm going to have to start to think about dropping the level of detail off a little bit. Lovely stuff. And we're just following all of our little green spots that we added in before. With just maybe a little consideration here and there for, you know, like varying up the angle, maybe adding in like a few more dashes here and there. But it's nice and easy. It's nice and sort of quick and easy. You can try and be quite sparing with it. And less will be more. So as we make our way further down, I'm starting to now think about, I'm going to dash in a few areas here, but not a lot. Just a few that maybe just catching a little bit of light, but it's really falling off now as it makes its way towards the bottom. And it's not going to get any down here, just focusing it in this top area here. And then with that, make your way back up your tree to see if you can add any in sort of the back end area here as well. A couple on that back side of the tree. Got a big gap there, but I like the larger sort of areas of darkness because they are just not sort of set up to receive any light from that top edge. So now once you've done that, we will carry on with this tree for a second. We're going to jump to this color here. It's the bottom of the 4th column. We're going to get in here and we're going to do it all over again. We're going to go over the top, same layer, but we're going to introduce even brighter tones. So we're going to try and match up to where we were a second ago, but adding in this lovely extra tone. This one's a little bit warmer than the last one. So what I'm trying to aim for here, just so you know, is I'm trying to sort of dash on top of those lighter greens. So you're kind of stacking them on top of each other. You've got green followed by light green and then this lovely sort of more yellowy tone on top. Again, same considerations as before. As we're making our way further down here, we're going to start to sort of tail off the light a little bit more. Going along some of these branches, you can sort of think about now, these are your final details. So you can think about maybe sort of trying something a little bit different, you know, maybe sort of shaking your brush like I am now, just trying to add in sort of little sort of tiny little areas here that are running off in different angles. We'll go along here. I'm just trying to vary up that tree a little bit more. Lovely stuff. Again, when you think about it, you're right up close to the details. So when you zoom out, you're getting a full picture. Now, again, you don't have to do every single area. You know, I've left a bit of a gap here where, well, for whatever reason, there's just not a lot of light. You don't have to make it super consistent all the way down. You can just add in little areas that are getting some love. And then maybe in areas that you maybe don't think about too much. You know, like down here, I've left that sort of gap in between, but that area here seems to be getting some love as well. And then I'll do the odd one a little bit further down. I'm going to go back up into this area, and when you look at it, you've got lots of just dashes and sort of scrapes here and there, just running in lots of different angles. Now I'm just going to make sure that there's a few right on the end here of some of these branches that are a lot brighter, just so that it will separate it from this one in behind it a bit more. So I'm just thinking about maybe adding the odd little extra sort of flick here and there along this edge. How can we add in another one or two just to really sort of separate that on that brightest of side of the tree from the darkest edge of the other one? Along there. Oh, and that looks lovely. I'm really happy with that. If you zoom out as well, you get the full picture. So let's go ahead and start to think about replicating this a little bit further back. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go down to the tree that's in behind, which is just here, and we're going to turn that back on. We're going to create a new layer, and we'll swipe from left to right on both of these and group them together. So we've got our top tree, which we can collapse, and we've got this tree set here. Now we're going to go to our colors, carry on in a similar process. I'm going to grab this color here. It is the bottom color in that third column, and brush size can stay as it is. And we're going to go over the top again. So we're doing it all over again, except what we do now, we can be a little bit naughty and sort of duplicate it in a second. So we're looking for the top end of some of these green areas that I've previously created, some of the branches as well. Just looking where we can add some too. Now what I would recommend is, even though I've got some green areas here that get close to this tree, I'm going to leave them. I'm going to leave them ones a little bit sort of darker, not getting quite so much love, just simply so that we've got that lovely separation between the two sides. And then I'm thinking also about maybe adding in sort of a little flick here and there where we can just introduce a new branch that we've not yet sort of identified, just to try and make sure that there's lots of sort of fun shapes here that are catching some light. And towards the bottom again, similar kind of rule. I kind of let that tail off here, and if you run that into your perspective point, you're kind of looking at like there as your sort of final point. So I'm going to just do exactly that. And I do that quite frequently in my tutorials, or even in my own drawings in my own time, where if I've got a perspective point like we do today, I'll just run a line to it. And that, if for whatever reason, can just help you as a guide as to know where to stop doing something or start to introduce something. That looks pretty good to me. We'll move on to the one just in behind it. And we'll try to keep this one a little bit sort of less detailed. Again, just the same way as we did with it before. At the top here, I'm going to introduce a few areas that catch in the light. But we're very, very, very zoomed in at this point. So we're going to dash in a few areas here. Try and keep it a little bit more minimal. And you'll notice we're not going to also use that brightest of tones that we did before. Simply being, things are getting further away from us now. They're going to start to fall off. We won't see that crispy detail. So once you've done that tree, we've now got this sort of setup ready to go, that we can now swipe that to the left of exactly what we just worked on and duplicate it. So we've got these two layers in here. We've got this here of all these highlights. Now for a minute, we'll swipe it to the left and we'll duplicate it, and the bottom one out the two, we'll grab our cursor, we'll make sure we've got uniform selected, and we will just scale this down in size, and we'll try to apply it to some of the trees a little bit further down. So here you can see it doesn't quite match up, and that's fine. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to the layer or the group, tap on it, and we'll just go ahead and flatten it. We'll swipe it to the left and duplicate it. And then we're going to go ahead and just turn off this top one. So it's just there as a backup, so we can go back to it. So we've got something to duplicate over and over. If we go to the layer underneath that is still on, which you can see here, I'm going to again use the uniform option and scale this down even further and just position it so I can get it pretty close to this main tree. I'm just looking at the next tree down. That's all I'm looking for. Just going to scale this down in size, try and get some green on there. Tap on my cursor when I'm done. Now, if it doesn't quite match up, like this one here, just grab your eraser, tap on it. Just go ahead and use something like airbrushing and the soft brush. And we'll grab a 2%, just erase that entire tree. So all we're left with is the green of the one before. And then you can grab your cursor and just distort this if you need to, maybe make it a little bit wider, maybe rotate it just to fit the tree. Now, everybody's going to be different. That's why I want you to sort of rotate it and try and fit it yourself to your tree. Ultimately, though, as long as the details are getting smaller and further away, you're good. Now we can go back to the backup layer we created, swipe it to the left and duplicate it, turn on the bottom one, tap on it, grab your cursor, use maybe the uniform option again, and just scale this down in size getting even smaller, and then again try and fit it on some trees. I can see there that that one pretty much matches up quite well to that tree. Uh, let's just scale that down in size. You can even use the warp tool if you like, and just maybe sort of grab this and just try and drag it into position. I don't want you to sort of stress over these ones in any way at all because they're so far down, we're so zoomed in, and we want that detail to fall off. So it doesn't really matter too much. Tap on your cursor when you're done, and as long as there's a hint of green on there. Now you've got that backup just in case. So if you want to, you could swipe it to the left and duplicate it, turn on the bottom one again, and if you feel it's necessary for yours, you can scale it down in size and chuck some green back here on here too. So I think I might do exactly that. In fact, we'll just add in a little bit on here. I'm going to widen that up a little bit more and move that one across onto there. And that's all. We'll leave that. Awesome. Let's then go ahead now and add in the opposite side. So we'll go to our layers. Let's first of all go ahead and we will swipe from left to right on all of these extra sort of green layers we created and group them together. They're all sort of the little details down there. Now at this point, feel free to tap on it and flatten it down if you're happy with yours. Now this big green sort of dark patch here that we created, the sort of base color in behind, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. And the bottom one out the two, grab your cursor, go to the option of uniform, we'll go to flip horizontal and we'll move it across to the right hand side. And we'll try to position it in the right spot, right up against there, lovely stuff. Tap on your cursor when you're done. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go in the layer again, swipe it to the left and duplicate it, so it will just darken it up, it'll thicken it out, because the sun is technically here, so this will all be quite silhouetted up here. We're then going to pinch those two together. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to swipe from left to right on both and group them together so the right side is nice and grouped. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the top color in the third column. The brush is set to the leatherwood again at 3%. And we're just now going to sort of fine up this shape a little bit more up here. So we're going to end up with like a silhouette of a tree, more so than sort of a detailed one. And you can vary this up now to the other side. So, do something a little bit different. Let sort of some branches run astray a little bit higher, a little bit, just a little bit more unique. Use the base shape, but ultimately, maybe drop another tree, say here, for example, and just follow the same rules, just diagonal lines down. Just creating the just silhouette of trees. Don't worry too much because again, in a minute, we will add like a sun up here. I'm going to just block in the center point of some of these, throw those branches out in towards the road. That one looks quite cool. Quite like the look of that one. Do the same back here. Now you may need to start to think about dropping your brush size to 1% at this point because we're getting a little bit further back. We don't want those branches to be too big and bulky. Want them to get a little bit more fine as we make our way. Zoom out again, just triple check. Let's do the same up here. Lovely stuff. Apologies if the camera does shake at this point. I am throwing my iPad left to right with these little lines that we're adding in. I'm going to fill in some gaps here and there just to vary it up to the other side. Like here, I'm going to maybe introduce like another tree. And even if it's just a little bit different to the opposite side, it'll just break that sort of immediate reaction of being like, that's duplicated. You can tell. Sometimes duplicating stuff is just so obvious. And it's quite distracting from the rest of the design. So if we can try and get away with it, we will. Now down here, I'm going to try and just even make a smaller brush size than that. And just try to sort of just vary up the top of some of these. Just to, add in like a little sharp line or two here and there. A little something. Nothing too detailed there, miles away. Zoom out. We've got a lovely different tree line on the right. We can now go through the same process. And if you want to save on your layers, we can do. We can just do it on the same layer. So we'll go to our colors. We'll grab the middle color in the third column there. We'll go back to the 3% brush size again, and we'll add in some nice sort of semi-highlights almost. So we're going to come down the edge of this tree here, but keeping it super sparing, maybe a little bit of light through here for some reason. So do it really sparingly to start with. And because the light was coming from the back of it, you can add in like a bit more of this green towards the back end of some of these trees. Like a little bit of extra green back there. And we'll go down into here, adding in a few areas of green area that's catching some light. Now, ultimately, even though they are sort of in the shadows, they would somewhat still have colour to them, of course. You know, they don't lose their colour fully. So we just need to sort of think about making sure that people looking at this do know it's a tree, of course, and it's, you know, nice and green. So you can see that the detail is not getting too low. I'm going to maybe think about adding like a few bits down here, just a few, but nothing too much. I want all that colour to sit right at the top and top only. And I'm going to let some of these greens run across. I'm going to probably bring that brush size down to 1% there. I can always tell just before it gets a little bit too big and bulky, I need to just drop it down for the area that it's trying to occupy. Again, nice big amount of green on the back of the tree is also fine. Do a couple more dashes in here. Bring that green down, and then as we get further down, you really just kind of want to maybe just sort of zigzag up and down sort of the edge of the tree and just see what fits, but like really lightly, just so that you could just quickly just add in a little line of green that's making its way down. Again, when we zoom out, we are miles away. So a little something like this, a little bit of green in there. That's cool. I quite like how that looks. And again, we're just letting that green just sort of fall off completely into here. Now that I've added in all of that, I can get back into here now and just maybe think about adding in very sort of subtle green areas in here. And a couple just right down here, not too bad, but just a few. And we'll probably just think about leaving those as we make our way further back. So that is what we're going to aim for at this part. We're then going to go ahead and we'll just continue on the exact same layer again. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the bottom color in the third column. And we're going to make our way back up into here, and on top of some of those greens again, I'm going to keep the brush size at 1%. Just going to introduce a little bit of a brighter tone, and especially up here at the very top of the tree, we can just add in some green on the back end of here. Adding in some green on here too. I should probably spend a little bit of time later on just maybe adjusting the shape of this one. This one looks a little bit wonky, but maybe it's more realistic. Maybe it's a bit more realistic. So on top of some of these green areas, again, we're just getting in here, adding in some crispy extra little bits of bright area. We're going to probably let those fall off quite quickly though, because of the sunlight coming across this tree here pretty much. So it's my 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got a little fella in here, so it doesn't really count, but 4 down is where we're going to let these greens just really stop. Just taking a look at that. That is enough detail for that side. We are good to go. Now, what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and move on from this point here and start to think about the sky and then the actual lighting and how it's all affected. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go right to the very bottom. Whatever your bottom group is, just tap on it, create a new layer and drop it underneath. So it's just in front of our background. We're going to go to our colors. We're just going to go ahead and double tap in the top left to select white. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to the option of textures, and we're going to go in and scroll up, to the option of Dove Lake. I love Dove Lake for clouds, and we're just going to go ahead and probably with a 13% brush size. Down here, we're just going to introduce a little bit of sort of the white area down here. And probably drop that down, to probably something around about maybe 10. So it's a nice big white cloud at the bottom down here, nothing too big. And then we will, though, introduce a nice large one up here. So really right above us, we're going to introduce like a big cloud up here. And then if we drop the brush size down to maybe about 6%, we can drop a sort of middle one in here too. It's like a smaller one. Now with clouds, you really don't have to sort of stress about the shapes of them. It's more so what we can do with this Dove Lake now. Because if we go to our smudge tool and we tap on it and use the medium brush under airbrushing, the opacity is set to 70% and the size is going to fluctuate because depending on the area we're working in. Now I'm going to go ahead and start off with the 10% brush size. And as I always do, you can leave nice sort of areas of this dove lake nice and crispy, like right on the edges. And then the rest of it, you just want to think about maybe smudging it out, turn it into a nice big fluffy cloud. And you can get really close to the edge. You can leave some areas like this where there's a bit of a larger gap. Both are not wrong. And we will just always make sure we end up with that nice horizontal push. I love when you push these horizontally and they just end up really sort of like the wind's catching them and pushing them right across the sky. They just look so pretty. So we'll push that across, push this area across as well. You can do that a little bit here. Don't have to do it too much. It's always, you can do it nice and subtle. 7% brush size then. And we'll do the same. We'll just smudge up to the edge at the bottom, because the light source is, of course, over here. Your brightest point should always face your light source. So like here, all my brightest edges are going to be at the bottom of this cloud. I can smudge them out, and you can smudge the whole thing if you want. It's totally up to you. Have a play with it. This is just my favorite technique for clouds. So if you've got a favorite, or you like to just simply use the clouds brush, you crack on. You're good. Down here at the bottom, we're going to go ahead and just smudge upwards towards here, and we're going to try and leave sort of the right edges. So I can see there's a bit of a shape here, just it's sort of forming, and I can maybe push up towards that and let that just sort of have its own little sort of space. And then this is like a little sub cloud. And on the back end of it, I'll push it out on this side too. Just a little bit of a smudge here and there, keep it a little bit subtle. And I love the Dove Lake, because the Dove Lake then just leaves you with areas that are not the same opacity as the sort of section right next to it. It varies up the cloud, giving you some really lovely sort of details in the sky. So we've got this lovely big area of cloud, and we've got our light source that's going to be appearing here. So let's get into exactly that. Let's create a new layer. Let's go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here, the middle color in the second column. Your brush wants to be set to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. Going to make it nice and large, maybe around about sort of 25%. And we're going to go around in a circle, sort of brightening up this area of the sky. So round, get really light as you make your way outwards, just sort of blending it across the sky. Like we've got this big yellow sun over here on the right. Now at the minute, this color looks a bit odd, but if we go to our layer, we change the blend mode from normal to the option of overlay. We tap away, it's just added in a really subtle bit of yellow here to the sky now. And what that will do is that will aid us in a second now, adding in our light beams. So we're going to go to our layers, and we're going to go right to the top, and we've got our guide. You can turn that off now. I'm going to create a new layer, drag it underneath the guide though, just in case we reuse it. So we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the bottom color here in the second column. Same brush, and the size though is going to be around about sort of 10%. And we're going to just push in some lovely sort of brighter light across the sky here, across onto our trees. And it's just coming from this sort of area here. So we're just going to continue just to push that across. And if you end up sort of reducing your brush size maybe down to about 6%, you can create some like nice beams that just make their way across. They're a little bit brighter than the rest, and it's just where it breaks out from behind the trees. And with the trees, just lightly go round some of the top edges, just as if the light's sort of breaking through. So just sort of glowing from in behind. Now if we go ahead and change the blend mode from normal, and we change it to the option of overlay, all that color will disappear. But if we swipe it to the left and duplicate it, and then duplicate it again, so we've got 3 total, you can see that dynamic kind of lighting now. Look how beautiful that looks. You've got this lovely glow across, and then it's just lighting just that top half where we added our highlights earlier on. If we then go to our layers and create another new layer, we're going to go to our colors, and we're going to grab the top color here in the second column. Our brush wants to now change to the option of luminance and the flare brush. We're going to max out the flare brush. Now the flare brush itself has a certain design where you get this tail off here, this diagonal line, and I want to keep that. So I'm going to go ahead and try and position it over on the left, and then flip it in a second. So what we want to do is we want to try and position it somewhat like this. You've got a little tiny tail off there and that diagonal line coming across. If we then go to our cursor and we flip it horizontally, the sun will then position itself up here, which is perfect. And you may want to even reduce that and bring it down, should I say. Then if we go to the layer and we change the blend mode from normal, and we change it to the option of screen, if we tap away, we've now got this beautiful sun just blasting through, and we've got these lovely little tail offs of the flare. Look how beautiful that looks. Then let's go ahead and go to our layers and create another new layer. We're going to go ahead and change the blend mode from normal to screen again. Change it to screen. But we're going to go back into our brush. We're going to go to the bokeh lights. I love this brush, but it's also a pain at the same time, so I apologize. I always try to just grab 2 lights. Now, all you need to do is just drag down. You just need to drag down until you find sort of 2 dots that you like the look of. And it will vary up the colors. And sometimes they'll be more yellow, sometimes they'll be a little bit more red. It's totally sort of random. But once you find 2, just grab your cursor and just position them in an angle that you like. So as long as you rotate it so that they kind of run in a straight line up towards your light source, you can position them like this. And we can even lower the opacity down of them as well, just to bring them down a bit more, down to maybe around about 50%, just so that they're not too bright. And now we need to go ahead and adjust the lighting here on the ground. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead then and we're going to find our ground layer here, which is there. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer in front of the entire group. So we've got the entire group here. And we've also got our dirt layer. So we're going to drag it in front of the dirt layer. So it should sit here in front of the dirt and in front of the ground. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We'll grab the top color in the 3rd column. Our brush wants to be set to the option of our textures, and we're going to go back down to grunge. Size, we can set it to a nice randomly large size, about sort of 24%. And we are going to darken up along here. Now, this may look a little bit odd. So in fact, what we're actually going to do is we're going to change the blend mode from normal. We're going to change it to overlay. And once we've done that, we can now start to really sort of take away so much of this highlight. So we're going to get in here. We're going to take away all the lighting in this area. And we're going to pretend like we're kind of trying to replicate the top of the trees up here. So I'm going to come along into the ground a little bit. And I'm going to really bring it across the surface, bringing it all the way across. This is going to give our design a real dark, dynamic kind of lighting look to it. I don't want to go too far down because that will just end up being an area there that's so far in the distance. Again, we're not too interested. A couple that just maybe make their way across. And once you get to a sort of point like this, you can go ahead and go to the layer and just lower the opacity of it. So just move it across so you can see half the road is nice and dark. And just bring that sort of slider down, maybe down to about sort of 76% maybe. And that should just sort of darken that up. But what I also recommend is if we go to our adjustments and we go to Gaussian blur and we swipe from left to right, we can really sort of blend that out, take a lot of the sort of the sharp edges away from it. So down to about 14% there, and then tap on your adjustments when you're done. Now, one final touch is we're going to go ahead and add in some just random lighting effects that are a little bit further back. So we're going to go ahead and we've got the 3 overlay layers at the top. We'll create a new layer and we'll just make sure that this layer sits underneath those 3 overlay layers that come across those light beams. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the middle color in that far right column. We're going to go to our brush and we're going to go to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. And we're going to make our brush size maybe around about sort of 22%. That's about right. And I'm going to tap right here in the distant point. I'm going to keep tapping really, really lightly until I start to see a little bit of that blue just come into play, like this. Just a little bit of blue. It's very, very subtle. So for example, if I move it off to the side here and I turn it on and off for you, that's kind of what we're trying to aim for. This little bit of blue. We're going to change the blend mode of this from normal to overlay as well. And then we're going to get back in there again and just try to just add in a bit more blue. So what that is that's just the sky. Further down, things are going to start to lose their color a little bit more. Now, then what we're going to go ahead and do is you need to be happy with your full design. We're going to go to our layers. We're going to make sure we are at the very top and our guide is turned off. We are going to go ahead and swipe down with 3 fingers. We're going to go to the option of copy all. We're going to swipe down with 3 fingers and go to paste. And that will give us a brand new layer at the top. So that's our entire design done on the very top here. We're then going to go to our adjustments and we're going to go to the option of hue, saturation and brightness. We're going to slide our hue to 59% and our saturation also wants to be dropped down to around about sort of 34%. You may think, Joel, this looks mad, what are you doing? But trust me, we've got it. Then we're going to go back up to our adjustments again, tap on it again and go to Gaussian blur. We're going to swipe from left to right and we're going to get up to around about sort of the 9 to 10% range. We're then going to go ahead and go to the layer. We're going to tap on it and we're going to add a mask to it. And we're going to go ahead and tap on the mask and we're going to invert it so it's completely gone. We're going to change the blend mode of the layer from normal to the option of lighter color. And then we're going to make sure we're on the mask. Making sure you're on it and your color is set to white, so double tap in the top left. Your brush wants to still be the soft airbrush, and we're going to make the sides around about maybe 30%. And just in the distance here, we're going to tap a few times, just really on that dot again, on the sort of vanishing point. Just keep tapping a few times. And what's going to slowly happen is the trees in the background are going to get this like really soft sort of just falling off color. Like they're going to start to sort of really fall off. They're going to get a little bit blurry almost in the distance. And it's going to introduce a bit more blue back there. And these trees look fantastic. I love this effect. And we can press a little bit firmer back there just to really make sure that this is like nice and sort of blended out in the distance. It's a really subtle change, but for example, if you turn it on and off, just the tops of your trees there just get a little bit more blue. They just start to get a little bit more of the atmospheric lighting, and it just fades off completely. And that's why I didn't want you to focus on your trees too much down here, because now they just look like silhouettes of trees just running off into the distance. And then we can go up to our actions. We can turn off our drawing guide because we don't need that line running down the middle anymore. We can pinch with 2 fingers, we can go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. As always, please be sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, share them with me in my Discord server, and if you haven't already seen the other version of this type of tutorial with the train tracks, I'll be sure to add the video right at the very end, so stay tuned for that in a minute. But as always, a massive shout out to my patrons who help make these videos possible. If you want to get your name featured in tutorials, get access to a catalogue of exclusive tutorials, which is over 80 at the time of recording, get sneak peeks, early access, and much, much more, as well as support the channel, hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. And as I mentioned, if you liked this particular one, you'll love this train tracks one as well, which follows pretty much exactly the same philosophy. So have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.